Thank you for joining us today. I'm David Thiokol, Director of Business Development for SBS Desert Mountain. This presentation is being brought to you by the Phoenix office of SBS Group. We were formerly known as Silverware. The SBS Group is a national Microsoft Dynamics partner with offices in every region of the country. The purpose of this demo is to introduce you to some of the powerful features of Microsoft Dynamics NAV. NAV is extremely flexible in types of industries it supports, but today we're going to concentrate on the manufacturing functionality inside this comprehensive solution. Before the actual demo, I wanted to talk a little bit about Microsoft Dynamics NAV. NAV, or NAV, is a product aimed squarely at mid-sized wholesale distribution and manufacturing companies. It's been very successful in capturing companies coming off of legacy or proprietary systems, or companies that are currently on entry-level products such as QuickBooks or Peachtree and are ready to graduate to true ERP solutions. Although it's very powerful out of the box, NAV has been designed from the top down to support customizations or modifications through the availability of its source code. Changes there when you want it or need it, and I emphasize when it's justified. NAV is the most widely used mid-market ERP system in the world, with over 1.4 million licensed users and 88,000 installations in 40 different country versions. This means substantial adoption, which promises significant research and development dollars going forward from Microsoft to ensure its long-term viability and market share growth. This also means that there's a strong community for support and development of add-on functionality to meet specialized needs of certain vertical industries. Our company has a long history of supporting ERP systems and is committed to very structured implementations using proven methodologies. Because Microsoft products are more than likely already adopted by your company, we can leverage that adoption to make NAV complement the products and technologies already in use in your company. As you can see on this puzzle slide, NAV supports all the departments and functions and many industries with an emphasis on manufacturing, distribution, and professional services. But as I mentioned, today we're going to demonstrate some of the functionality that applies to manufacturers watching today. This industry faces unique challenges in attempting to minimize inventory levels, improve forecasting and demand planning, and satisfy production scheduling and compliance requirements. The most common complaint we hear from prospects entering the ERP or MRP, Materials Requirements Planning, search process is the need for better visibility into the entire manufacturing cycle. Dynamics NAV accomplishes this very well, and we intend to prove that to you today. Microsoft is very committed to the Dynamics NAV product. The newest release, NAV 7, is coming in late 2012. Microsoft roadmap for NAV shows continued development beyond 2017. This commitment makes NAV an extremely safe long-term investment for your company. We'll be sharing the current version with you today, but it's okay to start thinking ahead. This is a prototype of something they are working on for the future release. It's a visual production plan. Those of you who are familiar with production plans will observe that it's unlike any that you have ever seen before. Production plans are typically very dry lines of numbers and codes. This is a visual representation of components in stock, production processes, and customer orders. This tool will enable production managers to move stock across the product plan to prioritize critical customer orders. Current systems often make this so hard that the prioritization does not get done, but by making the capability more intuitive, your customers will be better served. But enough about what you can expect from NAV in the future and back to what it provides today. For the demonstration, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Silver, General Manager of SBS Desert Mountain, who will show you how NAV will help your company. Sarah, would you mind sharing with us how NAV works for manufacturing companies?
Okay, here we go. I would like to first introduce you to the NAV, or Dynamics NAV Role Center, which is the heart of Dynamics NAV. A role center can be created for a specific user or group of users to present on their desktop the tasks in NAV which they use the most. I like to think of a role center as a personalized dashboard or control panel for a user. NAV comes pre-configured with 24 role centers that can be further configured for each user. And actually, the user can configure their role center themselves. Let me first show you how I set a role for a user, and then throughout the webinar, we'll look at how a user can configure their own role. I'm going to open up the user personalization option. And here I see a list of users in my system. On my name, you see that I'm set as a production planner. That's because today I'm going to be playing the role of Mark, a production planner at Kronos USA, which is a company that manufactures furniture, and actually I'm going to manufacture a computer too. You'll notice here on the Profile ID drop-down, I can see all the different roles available: bookkeeper, small business president, payroll person. I'm going to go ahead and stay with production planner for the purpose of today's demo. Now let's go back to my NAV homepage, or role center. The navigation pane here on the left features shortcuts to the NAV functions that Mark uses the most. If Mark needs to use a NAV feature that is not on his navigation pane, he can search in the search window, as I searched before for user personalization, or he can go to the Departments menu. From here, I can get to any feature within NAV. Of course, NAV's user security setup is going to keep Mark out of any functions he's not been granted access to. Mark can also add a function to his navigation pane by going to the Customize Navigation Pane option. I'm going to go ahead and add the option for transfer orders to my home page. I'm going to click Add. And find the transfer order function in my menu hierarchy and hit OK. Now we see that Mark can get to the transfer orders whenever he needs to. With NAV, role centers, and user personalization, you can deliver the right experience to each user without any programming or without involving IT staff. Let's highlight some of the other items on Mark's homepage. The activity queues here in the center, which I'm rolling my mouse over, show various shortcuts to various lists in the system. For example, Mark can see all production orders that have been released to manufacturing by clicking on this activity queue. Anytime I click on an activity queue, it brings up the detail list. A warehouse manager might have activity queues showing sales orders that are ready to ship or inventory items that are below reorder points. Mark also has an activity queue here of the purchase orders that he's created that he's responsible for. I think you can see that in NAV, the role center information is pushed to the user, and the user doesn't have to open any business intelligence tools to get to relevant data. NAV provides business intelligence on the desktop. Over here on the right, Mark has shortcuts to his favorite vendors and items. Mark might want to check in with a specific vendor today. As a reminder, he can add that vendor to his My Vendors list. I'm going to go ahead and click Manage List and bring up the list of vendors. Notice I can search on any column on the list that's showing here, so I can search by name or number or city. And now I've added Coolwood to my list, and so Mark can remember to call them. He might also want to monitor quantity on hand of a critical raw material item. So I'm going to go ahead and add that item to my items list. I'm going to go ahead and add in a blank line. And again, I can search for the item by item number, which I happen to know, or by description. And so now on Mark's homepage, he sees that item and the quantity on hand of the inventory. He can always double-click on this and pop up what's called the item card, which gives the detailed information about this item. From here, for example, he could click on the link that's been set up, which shows a picture of the item. On the item card, Mark can also check inventory on hand for this item by warehouse location. So let's go up to the related information menu and click on Availability by Location. Here he can see the on-hand balance, upcoming supply, and demand to determine a projected available balance for the product by inventory location. Mark might not like to go to all the menus to find that information because he has to do it frequently. He can add a shortcut to his action pane, which is this blue ribbon, so that he can get to it very quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and do that by customizing the page. Action pane, and choosing Add. I'm going to follow the same clicks I did in the menu. Now Mark can get to that inventory by location very easily by clicking this one button. And this is saved for him every time he comes into NAV. Here we see that we have on hand 2,195 of this item, and we looked before as we saw how it broke out by warehouse. We also see that we have 15 on purchase order. Clicking on this open quantity on purchase order number pops up a list of purchase orders that are open, and I can click Show Document to see who the order is going to or more details about it. We can also do reservation entries to reserve this for a particular customer. I see that I have a quantity of 3 on component lines, meaning this is being used in production on a quantity of 3, and actually I have it set on 3 different production orders. Let's go back to the home page and follow a few more of Mark's tasks. Each morning, Mark must review a list of delayed purchase orders, orders that had a requested receipt date prior to today. He has an activity queue for this on his home page. He can go ahead and click on it and determine the appropriate course of action for each of these purchase orders. He can add a notification on one of these purchase orders to send a note maybe to the buyer to have them figure out what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and just send this to myself so we can see it on my home page, but typically Mark would send this to the buyer, and then the buyer would see it on his home page when he comes into NAV. So here we see why is this late. Double-clicking on it pops us back to the purchase order. Notifications can be set for any type of transaction, for a customer, a vendor, an item, and the related transaction. Now let's look at how Mark can edit data very easily. Mark has been informed that vendor Oakville World has been lagging in performance, and he needs to increase the expected lead time on products from this vendor. First, he must see which items are supplied by this vendor. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my item list, which is in my product design section on this Role Center. From this page, I'm going to set an advanced filter on the vendor number. I can choose vendor number, and then I'm going to go ahead and enter the vendor number for Oakville World. As I start to type it, notice how it pops up in the list, and I can just select it. Now I see the 8 to 10 items that are supplied by Oakville World. From here, I can hit Edit in Excel. And this opened a list with just those items in Excel for me. I'm going to search to find the lead time column. Notice my lead time is set to be 1 week for this vendor as a default lead time. I'm going to go ahead and change this to 2 weeks. We have a series of formulas to identify D for day, W for week, M for month, etc. I'm just going to copy and paste 2 weeks onto all the rows. Now I can go ahead and hit the Dynamics Nav button, Save Changes, and NAV was updated with that data. If I go ahead and open one of these items now, notice my lead time has been set to 2 weeks from 1 week. If Mark had entered invalid data, or if someone else were editing the same data at this time, Mark would have gotten a message when he hit the save in Excel, and NAV would not have been updated. This is an example of how NAV uses web services in its architecture so that we can work with external programs. Now let's look at the item card in more detail. There will be one item card for every raw material item, every finished good, or every subassembly that is used that Kronos purchases, makes, or sells. We're back on the same wooden door item, 70010. The item card is going to have all relevant information about this item, such as the description, the unit of measure, and costing information. In NAV, we can maintain multiple units of measure for an item. Notice how this item can have transactions by the piece or by the case of 12. The base unit of measure, or piece as I have it set, would be the unit of measure used for the physical inventory of this item. On the Invoicing tab, I'm able to set the costing method that this item utilizes. NAV supports GAAP costing methods such as average, LIFO, FIFO, standard, and specific costing for serialized items. On the Related Information menu, we have a Substitutes option. This lets us set up any substitutions that are available for the item. This information is a useful reference for the user. And when entering a sales line for an item, if there's not enough quantity available and there is a substitute, the system will give the user a message. Now let's take a look at how item replenishment works in NAV. Okay, I scrolled on the wrong thing. There we go. Every item can be set to have a replenishment system of either purchase or production. This tells NAV how you typically get this item. NAV can also be set up so you can purchase to one warehouse and transfer items to another warehouse through transfer orders. On this item, I have set the replenishment system as purchase, and I have identified the default vendor and default vendor item number for this item. The default vendor item number is what will print on purchase orders for this vendor. Of course, I can set up other vendors for this item. In fact, I can set up an unlimited number of vendors and their respective part numbers, but this is just the default that our replenishment is going to use for the automatic planning. The flushing method allows us to select the method the program will use when it calculates the consumption of raw materials in the production process. I would select forward flushing to automatically consume raw materials when an operation on a route is started. Backward flushing is used to issue the components when the operation is complete. With manual flushing, the user, of course, must dispose the consumption manually. In the planning section of the item card, we identify a reorder policy. Here, I determine if I want to place replenishment orders specific on an order-by-order basis, if I want a fixed order quantity, or if I want the system to sum the requirements due within a reorder cycle. That's called lot for lot, and that's what I'm going to choose. Notice my reorder cycle is 1 month, or 1M. I could also set a minimum and maximum order quantity and order multiple. NAV will calculate the quantities required for this item in the planning based on all of these parameters and create one order within the reorder cycle of 1 month for the vendor. Now let's look at an item that we manufacture instead of one we purchase. I'm going to go ahead and bring up a desk item. I need to clear out my filter that I had set before. I'm going to go ahead, 1896, and bring up the Athens desk, which is an item that I manufacture. Notice on this item, we have a replenishment system of production order. The manufacturing policy is make to stock, and we have filled in a BOM number and a routing number. Notice how BOMs and routings are maintained separately. This allows me to have a generic assembly route that I can use on many furniture items, but I'm going to have a very specific bill of materials. So let's go look at this BOM in more detail. I'm going to go to my Product Design tab again and pop up the production BOM for the Athens desk. On this page, I have identified the items that are used to make this desk and the quantities of each item. Notice I can set multiple versions of this desk. One version will be active, and that will be the default version that MRP will use. But I can override the version at any time I'm making a production order. To see the differences in versions, I can go to the Matrix per Version button and see the components that are used. Notice how version 1000 uses blue paint and version 1001 uses the black paint. At this point, I might be interested in printing a quantity explosion of the bill of materials report. The system will select a version of the BOM based on the date calculation that is used here. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up, my January 2011 version of the bill of materials. And notice how it's using the blue paint. If I change my calculation date when I run it to be February of 2012, when I came up with my new version, you'll see that it's now using the black paint. Now if I go ahead and print the same quantity explosion of the bill of materials for a different item, I can see how it goes multiple levels deep. I'm going to go ahead and print the BOM, the quantity explosion BOM, for what I call the office system, 766BC-B. When I preview this quantity explosion of the bill of materials, we'll see that it goes multiple levels deep to show that the Oslo storage unit, for example, has a bill of materials claim, with these items on it, containing these items, and the San Moritz storage unit has these additional items. So we can go multiple levels deep. In fact, NAV will go up to 50 levels. At this point, I might also be interested in bringing up a rolled-up cost shares report. And this report is going to show me the finished good cost, including raw materials, capacity, and overhead costs. Okay, let's go back to the home center, the roll center, and let's create some demand for the Athens desk. I'm going to go ahead and create a sales order for this item. So I'm going to open our sales order functionality and create a new order and choose my customer. And I'm going to go ahead and just put the Athens desk on the order. Choose my warehouse location and the number of desks that we want that customer is interested in getting. At this point, I can go to the planning option and determine the earliest possible ship date for this order. Oops, I wanted to go to order promising, excuse me. Okay, and from here, NAV will calculate. Notice we have unavailable 250. I can use the available promise and capable to promise functionality to look at incoming supply of either the finished good if I buy it or the raw materials if I make it to determine the earliest possible ship date based on the vendor lead times and available inventory. I can now go to the order planning that I did before, and from here I could create a production order for it right now. This option is really helpful if you have a one-to-one relationship between sales orders and production orders, and you do not necessarily need to schedule or plan for production. In more complex manufacturing environments, salespeople are not going to be creating production orders as I was about to do. Instead, a production planner would use the MRP functionality in NAV to create the production orders. So let's go ahead and do it that way instead of just creating this production order. I'm going to close out this sales order now and go into what's called my planning worksheet. The planning worksheet is the engine that drives NAV's MRP. I'm going to go ahead and empty out my last planning run and start fresh. I'm going to go ahead and click Calculate Plan to begin the process. I can identify the dates I want to do my planning for and any forecast I want to include in my plan, which I'll show you later. I'm going to right now filter my planning to just build this one desk. I set all the items that are used to make my Athens desk to have the same item category code of furniture. Otherwise, I would end up with a whole lot of products in my planning that will make it confusing. So I'm filtering my planning run just for the furniture items. When I run the plan, I see now that NAV is suggesting I build one production order for the Athens desk for 472. Though my sales order was for 250, it's looking at other demand requirements that are in the system, probably other sales orders that have not yet been accounted for, again, within that reorder cycle. So it's suggesting one production order to cover the reorder cycle of, I think I had 1 month, and that's all the demand required during that time for that warehouse. I also see that it's suggesting multiple purchase orders for the components and their requirements within their reorder cycle. I also have a suggestion to cancel a purchase order because there's one out there that's due to come in too late. So it probably accounted for the door on another purchase order. At this point, I could go ahead and carry out action messages for each of these lines, and that will go ahead and create my production and purchase orders. But I'm going to wait to do that, so we'll close this for right now. Okay, in that example, inventory was evaluated based on the quantity on hand of raw materials at my manufacturing location. If I did not have enough, a purchase order was recommended, as you saw. With NAV stock keeping unit functionality, I can set up a replenishment method of transfer that inventory is recommended to be transferred from one location to another if it's available at a different location. This is typically used when purchasing is done at a central distribution location, and then transfers are used to move inventory to the various locations based on their projected inventory. So let's take a look at an item that I've set up stock keeping units for. I'm going to go ahead and bring up item 70201. Oops, I'm in a production bomb. Okay, I'm going to bring up this doorknob item. And from here, I'm going to go to the stock keeping units list. Notice that I stock this item in two different locations, the blue location and the yellow location. In the blue location, I've set the replenishment system to purchase. At the yellow location, I've set it to be transfer. If there is a requirement at the yellow location for this item, a transfer order would be recommended to pull the inventory from blue to yellow. If I didn't have enough at blue, it would recommend also a purchase at the blue location. Okay, that's a bit about materials and how NAV planning handles materials. Let's now look at the capacity, how capacity ties into the planning engine. The first thing I must do when I'm setting up the capacity planning is set up my shop calendar. Since Mark doesn't go into this very often, it's not on his homepage, so I'm going to search for it. Okay, I bring up the shop calendar option. Notice I have two calendars set up, a 1-shift Monday through Friday and a 2-shift. From here, I should be able to see my line. Okay. In the working days, I'm able to show the days that the shop is open and the hours that each shift is run. So notice I have 2 shifts, Monday through Thursday, going from 7 to 3 and 3 to 11. And on Friday, I have just 1 shift. I can also specify holidays so that the planning engine will skip those days when it's doing the scheduling. Okay, so once I have my calendar set up, I can then look at machine centers and work centers. Multiple machine centers can be grouped together to form a work center, or a work center can be created on its own for capacity. I'm going to go ahead and open one of my work centers. Notice that each work center or machine center is going to have a calendar code, which calendar this work center uses. I can also identify capacity and overhead calculations that are used for and also efficiency ratings. Here I see that in this assembly center that my capacity is 3, meaning I have 3 assembly lines working in parallel, so that the time it takes to perform an operation is 1/3 of what the route is going to say. If I click on the load button up here at the top on my action pane, I can see that this work center is scheduled for the month of January 9.9% of the time. I could look at this by day, month, week to identify, lost my place in the dates. to identify what the load is in this on this work center. I guess I don't want to look at it by day, do I? Let's go back to month. Okay. There we go. And we can look at it by day, by week, or by month. If I drill down on the allocated quantity on any of these periods, I can see the production orders that are scheduled in this work center during that time frame. So we're able to get to a detailed schedule for the work center from the work center card. Of course, we can also print reports to show that to hand out to the work centers. A work center can also be a subcontracted work center, and NAV will handle subcontracting. If I assign a subcontract vendor to a work center, then a purchase order to the vendor is going to be created when I get to that step on my route. Now that I've created capacity by setting up my work centers and my machine centers, I can go ahead and create routes for my products. I have set up a simple desk assembly route that I used, as you saw before, on the Athens desk. Each step on my route has a setup time, a setup unit of measure, a run time, a wait time, a move time, and also I can have a send ahead quantity, which will identify how much can move on to the next step, even if I don't complete all the quantities of the previous step. I can identify scrap, and I can also identify what's called a routing link code. This allows us to tie lines on the bill of materials to lines on the route, so we know which parts are used on which step. This is what triggers the automatic flushing that I referred to previously at a specific step. If you don't use routing links, forward flushing would just happen when the production order is started, and backward flushing will issue the raw materials when the production order is finished. Routing link codes let you identify which step on the route the flushing should happen. Remember that the route was assigned on the item card, and the same route can be used on multiple items. When we run the planning worksheet for the finished goods or for subassemblies, the MRP engine will look at the capacity in the work centers to determine when components are required and if the production can be completed on time. Okay, the last parameter when I ran the planning worksheet that the system looks at is the forecast. I'm going to go ahead and bring up our production forecast so we can take a look at that. Notice I have two different forecasts set up, 2011 and 2012. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the production forecast. And I'm going to just change a few settings here. I'm going to look at it again by month. And I'm going to go down. I can go ahead and fill in the quantities required that I think we're going to sell of a finished good by looking at the sales item. For example, I can go ahead and populate what I think my forecast will be for an item for any time frame that I'm interested in looking at. I can also identify component usage for my raw materials and populate the component usage. In NAV, we set up our forecast manually, or we can import this data. NAV also supports planning based on your demand forecast and offers an option for advanced forecasting, which your partner can tell you more about. Now let's go back to our planning worksheet where we created our recommended orders and go ahead and create the production order from there. I'm going to go back to my planning worksheet that still has all the items that it had recommended we plan before. So that I don't have to go through the purchasing process and all the receiving of these purchase orders, I'm only going to create my production order, and I'm going to actually bring the quantity down and make just 2 of these desks instead of 400 and whatever it said, so that I know we have enough inventory, I hope, to make 2 of these. So I'm only going to accept the action message on this first line, and I'm going to go ahead and click Carry Out Action Message. It asks what type of production order I want to make, and I'm going to make what's called a planned production order, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Notice how it took that line off of my planning worksheet because now I have a production order that's already been made. Notice in my firm plan production orders, I can click on that activity queue, and there's the production order that it just created. Let's go ahead and open that. On the production order, I can go look at the components required, and here we see it's allocated all the inventory that was expected to be used. If I go to the routing, I can see where the planning worksheet scheduled the production to happen in each of my work centers and how long it thought it's going to take for each step. I could, at this point, make any changes to the schedule or to the component usage by editing these lines. This would change either the schedule or the component usage for this one bill of materials, but would not change the BOM or the route. It would only affect this particular production order. If I were to go back to the work center for the painting department, I would see that the production order has now been scheduled in each of the work centers, actually. The next step in my process is to go ahead and release this production order to the shop floor. To do this, I must change the status. I'm going to go ahead and click Change Status and make it a released production order. And again, back on my activity queues, I now have only 7 firm planned orders, but now I have 12 production orders, and here's the one that I just released to the shop floor. Now that the production order has been released, I could post raw materials consumption and create the finished goods output. These transactions can be posted as each operation on the route is completed and as raw materials are issued, or it can all be posted at once. If you use automatic flushing for either the materials or the route steps, the transactions would post automatically. To save time, rather than me going through each of the journals to post consumption and raw material and finished goods output, I'm going to go ahead and open my production order and go to what's called the production journal. The production journal assumes we used all the materials and capacity that we anticipated and that we created our finished goods. This is a great way to create a semi-automatic transaction when your manufacturing isn't going to vary very much. So I'm just going to go ahead and post my journal lines. When I completed that posting, all of my consumption and output was transacted, and I've issued my raw materials, I've added capacity costs, and I've created a finished good. Based on the costing method I used for my finished good, the finished good cost is accumulated, including any overhead and inventory that we added to the route. Excuse me. NAV also has the option for us to create kit bombs and to produce and sell kits. These are items that we do not necessarily plan for in manufacturing, but we instead build as sales orders at shipping time. We instead build at sales order shipping time, or we backflush as we assemble these items. Let's go ahead now and look at the item card for item 8912, which is a computer system. Okay. This item is also an item in which I'm using lot tracking. I've identified that this item has lot numbers on it, and as for our finished good, and it so happens that one component on the bill of materials for this finished good also has lot numbers. The goal is to show you how we can track lot usage from the finished goods to the raw materials while I also show you kitting. Kit bombs are very simple bombs which are one level deep. I've set up the kit bomb for this item here in the kitting section. I can also identify if when I use a kit, if I want the components to show on my sales order or my picking documents, so whether the customer should see the component list or not. I also have a setting to automatically build the kit, which means the kit would be produced at the time I ship this order from the raw materials. The BOM for the kit item 89WT is set up in the kit BOM area, and it works just like the production BOM. If I choose to build inventory for the kits and keep some of these on the shelf, I would go ahead to the BOM journal to do what's called backflush inventory. I'm going to go ahead and open my BOM journal. Again, Mark doesn't have this on his roll center, so I'll just type it up. Here I've opened the BOM journal, which is where I can identify what kits I'm going to build, and it will then pull the raw material components required. So I'm going to go ahead and identify the item that I'm building, which is the 8912WT, the location I'm building it in, the warehouse I'm building it in, and the quantity that I'm going to make. At this point, because this is an item that has lot tracking on it, I must identify the lot number of the finished good. Serial numbers would work the same way. I could set my lot number to automatically be created, but I'm going to go ahead and just type one in. I could create multiple lots at one time. On the kit lines option, here I can see all the components that are going to be used in building this kit. Again, because this Ethernet cable has a lot number on it, I must choose which lot of the cable we use when putting together these kits. So I'm going to go ahead and choose from my inventory that we use some of the C1000 lots. I need a quantity of 4 because there's 2 Ethernet cables on every finished computer. I wouldn't have had to go to this kit lines button if I were not doing the lot tracking. I only went there to add the lot number to the Ethernet cable. Now when I post this journal, my kit's going to be built. At this time, I issued the raw material components, created the finished good, and tracked all the lot numbers of both the finished goods and the raw materials. So now let's go to the item card and see how the lot tracking works. I'm going to close my journal, and let's go ahead and bring up the computer. If I go under related information and bring up what's called my item tracking entries, here I can see all the issues and receipts of that item by lot number. This was the one we just created, L5000. I see the issues are the negative ones and the receipts are the positive with the lot number associated. NAV's lot number tracing and serial number tracing functionality allows manufacturers to trace specific raw material items to finished goods and finished goods to raw material items by lot or serial number. At Kronos, a customer might call with a faulty cable on the 8912WT computer package. We can get the lot number of the finished good purchase and find out what other customers might have received computers with the same cable, even though different finished good lots might have been created with that cable. To trace the item, Mark is now going to go into the item tracing function. I'm going to enter the finished goods item number, and I'm going to enter the lot number that my customer told me they received. I, of course, could have looked at their sales history to find that lot number as well. I'm going to trace from what's called usage to origin. So in other words, from finished good to raw material. Hit the trace button. And here I see the 2 different sales orders that were shipped with lot X1001. If I pop these open, I can see here that L1000 was the lot of the Ethernet cable that was used. And I can see what purchase order that lot was received on. I see the other sales order had the same raw material lot on it as well. Now it's possible that I can find what finished goods this L1000 might have gone into by going from origin to usage. So now let's go ahead and search on the L1000 lot number and do our tracing that direction. So we found what component lot was used. Now I'm going to go from origin to usage and hit my trace button. And now I can see all the different sales orders that this was shipped out on. It so happens I only had those 2 sales orders that use this one lot. If I had had this raw material in other lots, I would see it right here. The NAV lot number tracing functionality provides manufacturers with a multi-level lot traceability, and it's perfect for many industries. So if we had a finished good with lots at multiple levels deep, this would keep expanding and opening to those levels to get us to the base lot number usage.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, that concludes today's presentation. We hope that you enjoyed it and that it was time well spent. And we hope that you have an interest in learning more. So to do that, I've put my contact information up on the screen. Feel free to email me or call me directly with your questions. We look forward to answering them. And also invite you to visit SBS Group online at www.sbsgroupusa.com. Thanks again for joining.